When Tom Barlow retired after 36 years working as a lineman for the power company, all he wanted was peace. He'd spent most of his adult life climbing poles in rain, snow, and blistering sun. He had the scars to prove it, and the creaks in his joints that didn't let him forget. At 64, he bought a small ranch-style house on 5 acres outside of Henderson, Nevada, a quiet patch of desert where the horizon stretched wide and the night still carried the song of coyotes. He built a split-rail fence around the property himself. It wasn't much, but it was sturdy, good, honest wood, weather-treated and anchored deep. The fence wasn't there to keep anyone out. It was there to mark respect. His land, his peace. The first time it happened, he thought it was an accident. He came out one morning to see a section of the fence knocked clean over, splintered and lying in the sand. Tire tracks cut through the ground, crossing from the neighbor's side into his. He sighed, fixed the boards, and didn't think much of it. Then it happened again the next week. This time, he caught a glimpse of a silver SUV kicking up dust down the road. He didn't know who it was until he asked around at the local diner. It turned out to be the same woman everyone warned him about, Nancy Fuller, head of the local HOA, who lived 2 lots over in the newer subdivision. "She runs that HOA like a private kingdom," said Marge, a waitress. "Good luck, if you're not one of her subjects." Tom chuckled, but it didn't sit right. He wasn't part of the HOA, and his land was technically outside their boundary. But that didn't stop Nancy from acting like the self-appointed sheriff of the whole area. A week later, she came knocking. It was late afternoon, the air shimmering with heat. Tom was on his porch, sipping sweet tea, when the silver SUV rolled up his dirt drive. Nancy stepped out, wearing oversized sunglasses, clutching a clipboard like a badge. "Mr. Barlow," she said briskly, "your fence is obstructing the community easement." Tom blinked. "Community easement? This here's my land, ma'am. The property line's marked and filed." She smiled tightly. "We've been using that access road for years. Your fence makes it hard for us to reach the back trail." "That's because it ain't your road," he said calmly. "It's mine." Nancy didn't like that answer. Her lips pressed thin. "You'll find it easier to get along with the neighborhood if you cooperate. I'd hate for things to become complicated." He gave her a polite nod and ended the conversation right there. He'd spent his life around tough folks, but he'd learned the real strength wasn't in yelling. It was in staying calm. But calm didn't stop her. Over the next few weeks, she started driving through again, always when he wasn't around. Each time, another part of his fence was smashed. Each time, the same tire marks carved through the soil. Tom started taking pictures. He marked the tire tracks, dated every repair, and noted the direction of travel. He never called the sheriff. He believed in solving things man to man, or woman to man, in this case. He even left a polite note taped to her mailbox, asking her to stop. She didn't. One night, he heard the sound, the crunch of wood breaking, the hum of an engine cutting across the still air. He stepped outside in his robe, flashlight in hand, and saw the SUV vanish behind a row of mesquite trees. Something inside him cracked a little that night, not with anger, but with disappointment. He'd lived his whole life believing most people were good at heart, that reason and respect still mattered. The next morning, he drove into town and bought a stack of metal posts, some reflective tape, and a motion light. Then he spent the whole afternoon installing a simple deterrent. A low trench filled with loose gravel, just inside the fence line, disguised with thin layers of sand. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He just wanted it to stop. That evening, he sat on his porch again, the desert cooling around him, the sky painted orange and violet. He felt the kind of calm that comes from knowing you've done your best to protect what's yours without crossing the line. Just after midnight, the sound came again, a roar of tires, a crack of splintering wood, and then the unmistakable grinding sound of metal on rock, followed by silence. Tom didn't move right away. He sat for a moment, heart thudding, and then grabbed his flashlight. By the time he got to the fence, the SUV was half buried in the trench, tilted awkwardly. The front bumper was torn, and the headlights were flickering. Nancy sat behind the wheel, stunned, gripping the steering wheel. She saw him and burst out shouting. You set a trap. You could have killed me. Tom held the beam steady. You drove through my fence again. You'll pay for this, she snapped. I'll sue you. I'll have you arrested. Tom didn't argue. He just pulled out his phone, showed her the photos he'd taken. Each broken fence, each date, each tire mark leading right to her vehicle. For a long moment, she said nothing. The night wind carried the smell of hot metal and dust. Finally, she looked away, her voice breaking a little. I just wanted to keep using the shortcut. It's faster. Tom nodded slowly. Sometimes the long way is the right way. He called a tow truck for her, then went back to his porch. He didn't sleep that night, just watched the lights in the truck as they pulled her car free. He wasn't proud of what happened, but he also wasn't ashamed. Over the next week, Nancy didn't come by, but something strange happened. The next time Tom went to a hardware store, he found a note tucked under his windshield wiper. You were right. I'm sorry. The fence looks good. Nancy. He stood there a while, holding that note, thinking about how pride made fools of all of us sometimes. A few days later, he saw her again. She waved from her SUV as she drove down the proper road this time, not through his land. He waved back. That small gesture meant more to him than any victory could have. The seasons rolled on. The desert bloomed with wildflowers in spring, and the mountains glowed purple in the distance come fall. Sometimes Nancy stopped by with cookies from the HOA bake sale or a few lemons from her backyard tree. She never brought up the incident again. But one day, she came by looking different, tired, worn around the edges. Her husband had passed a few months earlier, she said. She'd been struggling. That's when it hit Tom. Maybe all that controlling behavior wasn't about power. It was about holding on to something when life felt like it was slipping away. He invited her to sit a while on the porch. They talked until the sun dipped low. About life. About loss. About how hard it is to let go of the need to be right all the time. When she left, she smiled. A real one, not the tight HOA kind. You were the first neighbor who didn't yell at me, she said softly. Thank you for that. After she drove off, Tom sat there for a long time, feeling something he hadn't in years. Forgiveness, not just for her, but for himself, too. He realized that what he'd built out there wasn't just a fence. It was a boundary, a lesson in balance. Sometimes fences keep trouble out, but sometimes they remind people where kindness begins. Years later, when he told the story to his grandkids, they laughed at the part about the car in the trench. But he always ended the same way. Don't ever try to teach people lessons with anger, he said. Let life do the teaching. It's better at it than any of us. Nancy eventually moved away to live closer to her daughter, but before she left, she dropped one last note in his mailbox. You taught me more than the HOA ever did. Thank you for your patience. Tom kept that note pinned above his kitchen counter. When the desert wind blew through the open windows, rustling the curtains, it carried with it the quiet truth he'd learned late in life. That real peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from understanding when enough is enough, and when to let the world spin on without trying to control it. Every evening after that, Tom still sat on his porch. Same chair, same tea, same gentle hum of the desert beyond. The fence still stood, solid as ever. Not a single board broken again. And sometimes when the moonlight hit the rails just right, it seemed to him that the old boards glowed like silver, a reminder that strength and kindness weren't opposites. They were two sides of the same strong heart.